Guess what time it is, nonfiction branders? Yeah, it's that time again. It's time for IMNSHOW, the show that I keep my promise and share my not so humble opinion about something that's tripped my trigger over the past several weeks, or is an opportunity for me to do what I like to do, which is actually take my podcast sessions live to the people as they happen in real time. So that's what we're doing today. We're actually going to be doing a hour-long, or maybe a little bit more, session for the Nonfiction Brand podcast. And that brings me to the fact that I need to introduce you to who I'm going to be talking or having the conversation with. And I'm really excited to have her on because I heard her on a podcast, which really, once again, impressed me with the power of podcasting. Here's someone I had never met, and yet I think I know really well because I heard her on the State Bank of Cross Plains Wealthways podcast, because actually I edit that podcast and she was one of the guests. So here I want to introduce you to the very interesting Afra Smith. And thank you so much for being on the Nonfiction Brand podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, it's really cool because one of the things that people who listen to the Nonfiction Brand podcast know is I'm all about the non-fiction aspect of branding, which is you don't fake it, you don't make it up, you are it. If anything, you polish up what you are, but you always project the truth, the true nonfiction nature of who you are, what you do, and how you do it. And I'll be honest with you, Afra, you really caught my attention when I heard that podcast episode you did, because you were so raw and open with your personal story. And I don't want to go into everything right away other than to say you got a story that you don't just share, but you use as a springboard into conversations and into credibility and into authority with a very specific audience. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think you probably do.
Yeah,
Give us
absolutely.
a little bit. Give us a little bit about Afra Smith and who you are, what you do, and how you do it.
Yeah, so my name is Afra Smith. I'm an entrepreneur, financial coach, and I'm also the founder and CEO of the Melanin Project. And so my organization is focused on eradicating wealth disparities for women who identify as Black and of the African diaspora. And so my programs and services focus on advocacy, personal empowerment, and the financial wellness coaching. And I stress the wellness piece of it because it's a healing journey. I'm also the creator of the behavioral financial strategy called AODEC, spelled AODEC, which touches on the vulnerability and the healing process of the journey that you take when you're becoming financially well.
Well, that's a whole lot of information, but what got me is the story behind all that information.
Yeah.
And I'm a copywriter, so I don't mean to pick on people for the way they tell their stories or anything like that. But to me, as a copywriter, there's a difference between the brochure and the raw feed. And the raw feed that I heard you talk about on the Wealthways podcast is really what captured my imagination. And a lot of that was around many of the things you just talked about. About financial literacy and just basic financial wellness, specifically for women and people of color. And look over your shoulder and you'll see Afra's company name right there, the Melanin Project. Anyone who knows what melanin is knows it has more to do with people of color than it does necessarily white old guys here in the United States of America. But that's what I wanted to talk to you about, because you aren't trying to reach everybody. You're trying to reach the right people who you can best serve. Do I have that right?
That's correct. And, one of my close mentors said to me that a good brand, focuses on the right audience and it'll resonate with that audience. And, it's doing what it's intended to do. It's not supposed to resonate with all people. And so coming up with this name, I actually got a lot of pushback from some mentors, but I felt so strongly about the image behind me representing growth and sort of climbing a wealth ladder. And so I thought of my financial walk and a financial wellness walk as something that you just never stop doing. There's always a journey and there's always a next step in the process. And so it was really near and dear to me based on my experience and going through it and everything I studied from a data perspective, the state of Black women and where we were in the Black family. It really had me process and understand like this is my target market. And if I open it up too much, then I'm going to get lost in the shuffle. And so I had a story, I had a journey. And through that journey, I discovered there were other folks, other Black women in a similar setup and scenario. There's a reason for that, but here's a way out. Here's a strategy and approach to actually getting out of your situation.
Well, what I love about that is that you are doing what a lot of people call finding the riches in the niches, and what that means is, and it's got a number of different meanings, but for most people, what it means is if I try to do all things to all people, I'm going to do everything poorly. If I focus my efforts based on who I am, what I've experienced, my expertise, and then deliver them that narrow expertise, I'm going to do it better. I'm going to serve them better. They're going to be more satisfied with my services and who I am as a coach or a professional. And what happens then? They become what I like to call your unpaid sales force, because all of a sudden they're talking to their friends and family and extended network saying, hey, this person helped me out. I know you're in a similar situation. You should call her. And before we go too deep into the products and services that you offer, I really want to touch that story that I heard you tell.
Yeah.
I want to tee this up for you because this is not the typical hard luck story. This is a very interesting story to me about financial disparities between humans of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And you weren't, put it this way, when I heard that you were a high-level position within a company and had financial problems, and they weren't the typical financial problems, they were the real basic financial problems. It was like, wow, tell me more. I want to know more, because now I know why you might be valuable to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And I think that was actually my issue and why I took so long to open up. You know, I was sitting in corporate America and I had a financial issue. And my thought process at that time was, I can't share this because there's no way that another degreed person would be in the same boat. And so it was the embarrassment and shame I felt, you know, that kept me in the situation that I was in for so long. And it was almost as if I was living a double life. You know, I had a credit score in the mid 500s. I relied on high interest loan products such as payday loans, and I didn't have 1 to 2. I had 10 to 12. I was upside down in my car, and I was late on numerous bills and constantly paying late fees. If you name it, I had it on my credit profile to include credit card blemishes. And so sitting in corporate America, making a decent salary and having issues with financial literacy, who do I turn to? Who do I open up to? I didn't even want to open up to any of my friends or family about my situation. And so I found ways to cope and heal from that, which were not very productive and actually made my situation worse. It got to a point where it was so bad with the payday loans and I couldn't pay them back that I actually landed up on check systems. And for those who don't know what check systems is, it's the system that the bank uses to decide whether or not they're actually going to give you a checking account. So here I am, a degreed woman sitting in corporate America and not having a place to deposit my paycheck. And that was my story and led me, you know, through that journey.
Well, you know, the funny thing is that while your journey is very specific to you and probably resonates with a great many women of color, you're not alone. And I can point, I don't want to throw my mom under the bus, but I will say this, that when my parents were getting divorced, let's see, this was probably the early 80s, back when women did not have credit, or it was not very easy to establish or anything like that. She didn't have a credit card in her own name post-divorce until she was on the actual board of a bank. She literally went to the president of the bank and sheepishly said, "Hey, can you help me out?" And it was shocking. But that type of non-access to credit and credit products and services and it's not especially with high performing individuals, it's not an unknown problem. And the thing I loved about you being so open and telling your story is, and what I realized was, one of the things we always want to do with our personal brands is build authority. Authority tends to mean, I happen to be the expert. And when I heard your story, I heard you say in a very emotional way, I am an expert in this because I lived it and I suffered through it. And consequently, you're building authority and credibility, not with C-level bank executives, but with the audience you're seeking to serve, because all those people now know, you know exactly what I'm facing. You've been there, you've done it, and from what I can tell, you've overcome it. So please give me some of whatever you've got. That to me was like a light bulb moment for me, because again, I always thought authority was kind of the quiet thing you do. No, oftentimes authority is the thing you earn by opening up and sharing your personal experience completely authentically and fearlessly. That's what the big thing when I think of you and your story is, fearlessness. And I just, that's when I knew I had to reach out and get you on the Nonfiction Brand podcast.
Yeah, I think that definitely resonates with my journey and with my story, and thinking about just everything that I had gone through. And, one of the things I forgot to add is just the massive amount of student loan debt that I had accumulated, because the assumption was that I needed to go make more money. And the way to go make more money was to go and accumulate more debt from a master's degree. And so it just continued to compile. But I think that telling an open and honest story is a healing journey. And in telling my story, it makes other people more comfortable to open up to say, you know what, I have payday loans too. Or, hey, I'm also struggling. Or, hey, I also have a massive amount of student loan debt. What did you do to get out? And so for me being vulnerable, and I hear it all the time, people are in my inbox on Instagram and on LinkedIn thanking me for my post because it allowed them to be more open. And that's what I'm encouraging people to do. You can't get out of your situation if you're not willing to be open and honest about where you are, so that you can start to develop a plan, because there is a way out. You just have to be open and willing to seek out the services and support.
Well, you are so right. And, the same way that a lot of people think the word humility is the same as humiliation. And they may share some of the same Latinate roots. I don't know where the word comes from, but I will say this. In my mind, there's a big difference between being humble and being humiliated. Yeah. A lot of people, especially faced with the situations you described, go automatically to humiliation. And instead of becoming truly humble and say, you know what, here's a problem, I can't help myself, I need to find someone to help me. Once it's that old, you got to hit rock bottom first, I guess, before you start climbing out of that hole. But being able to identify someone like yourself who has been humble enough to share their story, to be incredibly open about it, you now are enabling other people to identify you as a beacon of hope, or dare I say, a ladder, or a stairway. As you look over your shoulder, if you're watching this live stream, you can see over Afra's shoulder the Melanin Project's logo, which is a woman climbing a staircase with a briefcase in her hand. This is not an image that is about being sad or unempowered. It's about achievement. It's about success. It's about moving forward and upward.
Yeah.
The only way you can do that is by doing what you exactly did. So I tremendously applaud you for that, Afra. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into the exact moment you said, you know what, I'm not going to be humiliated anymore. I'm going to be humble, but I'm going to share my story because I know my story, as painful as it is to me, can be very hopeful for other people. When did you decide that you, Afra Smith, were going to put your personal butt on the line, if you will, by telling the truth of who you are, what you do, and how you do it, and why you should listen to me because I've been there, done that, and gotten out of it?
Yeah. So I'm a former Division I athlete in women's basketball. And I was sitting in corporate America one day and I didn't get a promotion. And I had been in the organization for quite some time. And I knew I was the right woman for the job. I worked every day. I worked my butt off to really get this opportunity. And I didn't get it. And I became very angry. I was very bitter. And I just, in that moment, was so focused on what everyone was doing to me that I didn't really understand that I was in full control of my life. And I began to ask myself, what are you doing? How did you get here? You got to have a plan. And I reflected back on my days of sports and what sports really taught me, around dedication and having a goal and working hard. And even though you work hard, sometimes things don't always work out in your favor. But that negative experience was actually my catalyst. It was my catalyst to say, here's an opportunity for me to really figure out why I'm upset, why I'm bothered, and figure out a goal, right? And I realized that your employer is actually your first business partner. They're the ones that are actually giving you access to the thing that you need to be successful. My wage was the tool that I could use to walk to take that walk to financial freedom, that walk up. Earning a wage is not going to get me wealthy, right? You have to invest your way to wealth. And I realized I could spend all this time being angry at corporate America, my family for not helping me out, even though they had no idea about my situation, or I can take ownership and accountability and say, you got yourself into this situation. You need to go and figure it out. And sure, I can say racism was to blame or the level of microaggression I experienced in work environment was to blame. Those are things that I couldn't control. But what I could control is the way that I thought, the way that I process information, and the goals that I set for myself. And it wasn't until then that I was able to really start a process to say, what can I do? What are my goals? What is my plan? And I said, entrepreneurship and real estate were my two things that I knew I could utilize as tools to get out of my situation, or at least start the process and journey. And I discovered so much that has led me here today.
Well, I totally can see that in you. The light that I see coming out of you comes from someplace, and that light came from a very dark place. But I think you've discovered what a lot of us. Okay, so let me digress a little bit and just point out that early in my career, I had a creative director at an ad agency, and I'm a little prickly, especially when it comes to creative stuff. I'm a writer. And so when I write something, I have a lot of ownership over that thing. I think of it as my beautiful baby. And the first thing that other people do is start picking on your beautiful baby. And so you get a little prickly, because you want to protect that baby, right? And I was talking to my creative director, and he knew me as kind of this, overly protective father of this beautiful baby. And he said, you know what? Just because people are pointing out some flaws doesn't mean it's not good. But part of the problem I think you're having is you think the problem's out there. And that's the problem. And I'm like, what do you mean the problem's out there? And so I started thinking about it. It's like all the best kind of Yoda information is done in that, the problem is out there, young Padawan. And I started thinking about going, oh, I get it. Like you said, if you focused on things that you rightly could, they still aren't going to help you. You can point to them, and on maybe the darkest days you have a really bad day, maybe that's where you spend some time.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you said, that's not going to help me. That's not going to aid me in getting anywhere. And the acceptance of that, getting rid of the problem is out there and realizing, no, the problem's right in here, he says as he points to his forehead. That is what the Stoic philosophers have been talking about since, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and all the rest of the old Greek and Roman white guys. But there's a lot of wisdom there, which is if you think the problem's out there, that's the problem, because the only thing you can affect is you within you and the way you address the situations you're faced with. And I think that's very, very interesting that you've discovered that and have been able to use that energy, especially the negative energy. I mean, talk about a personal branding unlock. It's understanding that negative energy is still energy. You
Yes.
can become a converter simply by saying, you know what? I know you're a hater. That's okay. But guess what? I hate you as much, and I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to take the energy you're flinging at me and flip that script and achieve. And boy, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I'm going to feel a whole lot better about myself than you're going to feel about yourself.
Yeah.
And, Afra, you have created an entire business based on your journey and your success getting out of obstacles, getting over obstacles, getting out of situations that you found yourself stuck in. You now offer those services in the form of what? Are there products and coaching and workshops and things like that?
Yeah. So, aodic, which is spelled AODEC, is the foundation of my work. And it ties into my personal story. And it also touches upon all the things that you're going to deal with as you walk through some of the embeds of the principle of culturally responsible, but it'll work for anyone. And the framework aodic is that I won't work with any client unless I take you through this, because 80% of your inability to master your budget or be successful in life has to do with your mind and the way that you think. And so I can teach the principles of how to do the budget. That's not rocket science, and anybody can learn that. But it is everything else that comes with being disciplined, being consistent, and being willing to make the necessary sacrifices to get to the next level of your life. And I always speak about the foundation of wealth is mastering the budget. You can't do anything if you can't figure out how to make your money work for you. And most people are the expert in how to work and move their money. You're the expert of your household, so you know what you need to do and give up. I can teach you the foundation and principle. And so aodic talks about the A in aodic, acknowledging that you have a problem and seeking the help that you need. And me, again, being quiet about my situation, I couldn't get help. But the minute I did seek help, I found an amazing person. Yes, I had to go through a couple negative experiences, but I was determined to find someone to help me out. The O talks about owning your behaviors. For me, I did a lot of coping mechanisms. I was hanging out and clubbing and partying and buying things that I didn't need, taking trips that I couldn't afford to take, and just eating out and just living this really lavish lifestyle, this double life. And so I had to figure out, I had to take ownership of my behavior, and I was responsible for myself. The D stands for develop selective hearing, because along the journey, who you're going to listen to, the people who are living a scarcity mindset, or you're going to listen to those who are along the journey, the wealth builders. And so those are the folks I listen to, because along my journey, I had family and friends trying to disrupt my process, my approach, and my plan. And emotionally, the attachment to money, it can throw you off, and you'll start to listen to the 99% of people who aren't on the walk to building wealth. And the E is a really, really important one, because knowledge is power, and the E stands for educate yourself. I mean, I follow every financial person you can think of. I've read their books, I listen to their podcasts, I'm on YouTube consistently. I'm always immersing myself with some level of wealth and exposing myself to something that I just had no knowledge of. And the C stands for celebrate you. Because along the journey for me, it was hard. I paid off over 30K plus in debt. And it took some time for me to get there. So you got to figure out some points to celebrate yourself if your credit score goes up or if you pay off a credit card. And so I would find some different goals to say, hey, here's what I'm going to celebrate myself. I didn't take a big trip to Mexico. I mean, I bought myself a nice shirt or took myself to a nice fancy restaurant, but that's aodic. And again, it seems very simple, and it's something that I offer in a 45-minute seminar. And I ground people in that, and I still ground myself in it today, because it's the hardest part of the process. And so I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, where I teach people the foundations of the budget process through organizing your debts and how to pay those off the fastest way, how to reconcile, what percentage you should be saving. And then if folks have issues such as understanding how to repair your credit, I am not a believer in paying for credit repair. I believe in showing people how to do it yourself and understanding the rules around that. And also, giving people information about how to build your credit up and what products that you can actually access to help navigate that. Because I was on check systems, a lot of people don't know that there are banks that are really friendly towards folks that are on check systems, and they don't use check systems as a criteria. So you can still get access to a bank account. And so through my one-on-one coaching, I also have an online financial seminar that's self-paced. And I do group seminars for businesses and nonprofits. And then, of course, the live master classes that I put on from time to time. So, there's an array of services that are available depending on, what would meet someone's needs.
Well, I definitely want to talk more about those in next week's episode. But as Nonfiction Brand listeners, I hope you're getting this, that Afra Smith has built and is building a personal brand for herself based on what I would call the deepest, darkest secret you had as an adult in this life. That to me is fascinating, and I want to talk more about that again next week. But for now, what I'd like you to do is like, subscribe, and refer and review this podcast to others, because that really helps other people find it. And also, I want you to check out Afra Smith at www.themelaninproject2053.com. Afra, what other channels do you use regularly where people might be able to follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and I have two ways to reach me. You can reach me at _ Afra Smith, or you can reach me at _ the Melanin Project 2053. Either one of those is a great connection for me.
Well, there you go. Obviously, Afra, I love what you're doing, and I love the way you're doing it. But mostly I love the way that, well, frankly, we're going to talk through aodic again next week, because everything you say there about acknowledging, owning, especially developing selective hearing, I want to talk about that, because we all have not only people externally that we don't need to listen to, we've got some people inside ourselves we don't need to listen to. So we're going to talk about that more next week. But for now, I am your host, DP Knudten, and she is
Afra Smith.
And we'll be talking at you again next week. Bye-bye. Pause. Okay, so aodic, AODEC. That is an acronym that we talked about a little bit last week, but I want to dive into each one of these points very specifically, not the way you do it typically with your clients, but the way that we can apply those same concepts to the idea of building and owning your personal brand and doing it in a way that you can be proud of, that will project you forward, but that will be truly based on a nonfiction version of who you are, what you do, and how you do it. Again, I'm speaking with Afra Smith, who, if you listen to last week's episode, is doing tremendous work with her business, The Melanin Project, which helps people, especially women and people of color, develop financial wellness. I don't know if you use that term, but that's what I think of it is. It's financial wellness, because if you are financially unwell, it affects every aspect of your life, every relationship you have, both professionally and personal. And but if you are financially well, you are well on your way to whatever you want, whatever your dream happens to be. So I know that you probably preach that in all over the place, but I want to take your aodic concept set apart one at a time and apply them toward the concept of personal branding. So the first one, which is acknowledge. Can you talk us through what you mean by acknowledge?
Yeah, so acknowledge that you have an issue. That's the first step to healing anything, right? You have to first acknowledge that there is some kind of problem and that you actually need the help. And in order to get through something, you have to open up to somebody. You don't have to open up to the world, but you have to tell somebody that there's a problem, because that is the only way that you're going to get the knowledge that you need. We know the knowledge is the power. But in my mind, this mindset approach, this is the hardest step in AOD. This was the hardest for me, and it's the hardest for most of my clients, because even when they're in the session with me, they know my story. They are still uncomfortable. And there's this thing that we have, I don't know if it's a societal based norm or the way that we grow up, that money is this thing that we should keep hidden, right? And it's the one thing that we don't want to share, but it's the one thing that we all spend. And so why do we have such an issue with saying, hey, I have a financial issue, I need help, considering that the person next to you is likely broke and doing the same things that you're doing? We just don't talk about it enough. And so acknowledging the problem opens up for a sense of community to be able to say, I had the same issue, this is what I did, and this is who I went to for help.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take that word acknowledge and apply it directly to the necessity, from my point of view, to personally brand yourself, which is you need to acknowledge that you aren't getting the job you want because people don't know who you are or how good you are, or maybe that you have not, to use your second word, owned everything that is yours to own, which is someone took credit for my project and now all of a sudden they look fantastic and no one realizes that actually I did all the work. And because I'm naturally a little shy or hesitant and reticent, I'm just not going to say anything. Huge mistake. If it's yours, own it. And don't be ashamed of that. I know that you're a native of Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm located right outside Madison in Sun Prairie. We're from the upper Midwest, and one of the things upper Midwest people do is we keep our mouths shut, our heads down, and work until we die. And what a mistake that is.
Yes.
So the first thing you need to do is acknowledge that that is, in fact, a mistake that we make as human beings, especially those of us who like our deeds to prove who we are more than our mouths.
Yes.
Well, sometimes your mouth has to take credit for your deeds. And so I love that concept of acknowledge. Let's all acknowledge we have a personal branding problem in that we don't have a personal brand. You're building your personal brand. Like, we have not talked, even though we're in the state of Wisconsin, we have not talked about the Green Bay Packers. We have not talked about the Wisconsin Badgers, the local university's big football team, Big Ten football team. We haven't talked about the weather. Why? Because we're in Wisconsin, we're suffering together. It's freezing out right now, I'll tell you that much. But we're not talking about these things because they're not in your personal brand set of things to talk about. They're not part of your niche. They're not part of my niche. What we are talking about is my niche, personal branding and taking credit for who you are, what you do, and how you do it. And we're talking about your niche, which is building financial literacy and financial wellness with people who desperately need it. Guess what? We can talk about that stuff all day long and not talk about the stuff that takes us off topic, which kind of gets us a little bit to your D concept, which is develop selective hearing. I want to talk about that in depth because I need to hear more about developing selective hearing. What do you mean by that?
It's constant. This is one of those constant things, even today in life, where people will tell you things. And I will tell you how I got caught up in payday loans is I was down in Texas. I was living in Dallas, Fort Worth for a while. And a close friend of mine said, hey, did you know you can go get payday loan and not pay them back? And I said, okay, where do they do that at? Again, being financially illiterate, not having an understanding, I just listened to that and I just took that for whatever it was. And so that's my analogy for not everyone around you is educated and is going to offer you what you need in the moment. You got to understand what your personal journey is and the goals that you set forth. And you have to be weary of the naysayers who are going to come in and offer a critique. And that critique is not for you. That critique may be based on their fear and where they are and what they can't do. So you have to make sure that you stay focused, you stay disciplined on whatever goals it is that you've established for yourself related to your financial health. And the minute you hear, let's take the trip, and I heard it, let's take the trip. You can pay that back later. You have the money, you can do it. That was also an indication that I was on the right journey and that people were noticing my evolution because I refused to take that trip. I refused to maybe meet friends for dinner. I actually lost some friends along this journey because I wasn't willing to give up what I needed to do to be successful. And so I just tuned people out. This is not their journey. This is my journey. And I'm owning everything that I said I needed to own. And a part of that is, you know what? I appreciate the feedback. Thank you. And it's just literally in one ear and out the other. But who I will listen to is a financial person who is already taking the steps. I'm following those same steps. I'm seeing the positive changes that are happening in my life and the people that are now in my life. And so I just made a decision that this was always going to be a part of my life. And that's that emotional dry-in that you get from friends and family who mean well, but they don't understand because they're not on the journey. They're not on the walk with you. And so you have to be very careful because this will actually throw you off your path.
Oh, that is so true. The listening, developing selective hearing is a great way to talk about something that a lot of people talk about, especially in kind of the world I live in, which is imposter syndrome. I feel like I don't deserve to be here. I'm not as smart. I'm not as good. I'm not as witty. I'm not as brilliant. I'm just not as capable. Well, guess what? Who doesn't feel that way? Psychopaths and sociopaths. That's it. Everybody else feels that way. They look around the room and go, I shouldn't be in this room. But let's face it, everybody in the room is saying the same thing. And you know, it used to be the old thing, if you're a public speaker and you're afraid of public speaking, just imagine everybody in your audience wearing just their underwear. I'm like, nah, that doesn't work for me. But I will say, just imagine everybody around you is saying the same thing right now to themselves that you're saying to yourself. Wow, they know more than me. Wow, they're better than me. Wow, I don't think I should be even in this room. Well, here's the thing. If you truly believe they're better than you, you have an opportunity to learn from them. If you need to listen more deeply because you're a little bit afraid that your ideas are half cooked, that's not a bad thing. Because what you're doing is you're testing your concepts, yourself, before they come out your mouth. That's not a bad thing. I have been in meetings, I'm telling you, I have been in meetings where, and I'm thinking about a very specific meeting when I was a younger copywriter, and there was this old senior copywriter who now looked like then what I look like now, well, you know, with the gray beard and stuff like that. And he would just sit there with his arms crossed while everyone else is throwing ideas out right and left. And half of them are terrible. Half of them are maybe, whatever. And then all of a sudden, after a couple hours of, quote, brainstorming, he'd open his mouth, say one phrase. Every head in the room would turn to him and go, wow, that's brilliant. What I learned from him was stronger words are better than more words, or stronger conceptual ideas are better than just a plurality of words, you know, a multiplicity of words. And that taught me something, which was, you know what? If I don't think I can be here. I can. All I have to do is listen and think, and then keep my mouth shut until I have something worth saying. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, which is, you know, there's always that one person in the room that keeps their mouth shut the longest, and all of a sudden when it opens, everybody goes, "Yeah, I got to listen to more of that."
Yeah.
Why don't you become that? How did they get there? And the answer is because they stopped listening to their internal self that says you shouldn't be here. Instead said, I'm going to listen to all the smart people around me. I'm going to take those ideas. I'm going to combine them, remix them, and put my own spin on them, and then share this fully baked idea.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to eat it up like it's the delicious piece of brilliance that I just baked. Because it was fully baked. Yeah. And again, that comes out of your concept of develop selective hearing. Love that idea. Another one of your ideas, which I am a huge proponent of, is educate yourself. You know, again, you look at me, you see the salt and pepper in my beard, well, mostly salt, and you go, I should probably have learned everything. Are you kidding? My wife makes fun of me because if there is a foreign language film on Netflix, that's the one I'm watching with subtitles because I want to hear the actual sound of the language. Why? Because the sound of the language immerses me in the film. The reading of what they're saying forces me to pay stricter attention. And all of a sudden I'm learning new things. My wife, I don't want to pick on her, but she will watch the same TV series over and over and over again. For her, it's background noise. I don't do background noise. I do frontal lobe intensity. That's what I want. And it sounds like you're about that too. So when you say you educate yourself, you mentioned that you're constantly reading, you're following people within your sphere of interest, and you're TED Talks, Netflix. What are your favorite outlets to continue educating yourself?
Yeah, so I definitely believe in immersing myself in knowledge. And I think that was really critical in order for me to continue on the journey because all the tools that I have in my toolbox today that I'm using for other folks came through this education. And I think that it's such a powerful mechanism to keep to help support that develop selective hearing piece as well. Because what you know to be true, that you've been reading and hearing, and you start to hear the same concepts over and over and over again, you now realize like somebody else is fibbing and you shouldn't really listen to that. It also counters a little bit of negativity, although I embrace that whenever it shows up. But I love YouTube. I'm always on YouTube following any of the Wealth Builder channels, Earn Your Leisure. I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey, even though a lot of people are pushing back on him recently for some of the comments he made. His book, Total Money Makeover, was the first financial book I read. Rich Dad Poor Dad was another book, one of my first books that I ever read through, and it was just very powerful to read it. I was so excited to see these concepts and to have them written out in a way that was tangible for me. And so it's every day. I have audiobooks that I'll play for a few hours. I'm up every morning at 5 a.m. and that's what I'm doing. I'm immersing myself in some kind of knowledge around credit, anything educational. Last night I was on a seminar with a real estate guy. It was a free seminar, masterclass. I'm going to join in and see what he has to say. So I'm always learning something from somewhere that will trigger something for me to say, oh, I can do this. Or, hey, I might need to change this. I think mistakes are where I get my most power. When problems show up is where I get the most power because it gives me an opportunity to research. And even when I make mistakes, it gives me the opportunity to research. Or when a door closes, I don't get upset anymore about that. I'm like, that door wasn't for me. And now that I have all this education, I know that somewhere along the line, something's going to show up that I need because I'm immersing myself and exposing myself constantly to it. So how can I not be successful with all the knowledge I have?
Well, I love one of the things you said about mistakes being an
Yeah.
opportunity to learn. Being the old dad that I am, one of the things that I constantly pulled out for my daughters was a mistake is only a mistake if you've done nothing to correct it. And that correction comes in the form of education. And I love the fact that you're going to the University of YouTube because let me tell you, I learned a long time ago when my college-age daughters were a lot younger. One day I was watching them, and I'm one of those people who's very much teach a person to fish, rather than show them. It's like, no, go to Google. Let's look it up. I'll help you learn how to do it. But from now on, you go to the Google and you find out this stuff. And they wouldn't go to Google. They'd go to YouTube because they would much rather search for something and then watch a video about it. And that it's now basically true. Entire generations view YouTube as a primary resource for research and education and entertainment and everything else. So, and I'm all for it. Like when I started this podcast, I didn't know how to podcast. Well, guess what? There's an app for that, or in this case, a website for that. It's called YouTube. And I happened to watch a Pat Flynn video that he created for Tim Ferriss on how to podcast via Apple GarageBand, how to edit and all that stuff. I'm like, Tim Ferriss, Pat Flynn, and Pat Flynn, by the way, Do you think it was an SEO play to put Tim Ferriss's name in the title of the YouTube?
Wow.
Yeah, it was. But it was also Pat Flynn using a concept that I like to call fly with the flock you want to be in. Pat Flynn created this for Tim Ferriss. I don't know this to be true, but my supposition is Pat Flynn said, you know what? I would like to get to know Tim Ferriss. I heard Tim on somebody's podcast wondering how to create a podcast. I'm going to do a video specifically for him. And so he did. And he got my attention and taught me via the University of YouTube how to do a podcast. It's amazing. We live in a golden age of entertainment, yes, but education. Because as you said, you know, I think back when I was a kid, I had the benefit of a family. Both my parents have PhDs in sociology and all that stuff. So education was a given. But one of the things I had was access to periodicals like magazines. We had Inc. magazine. We had Forbes. We had Money magazine in our house. And even as a kid, I'd pick one up and I'd read and not understand every, you know, maybe I understood every fifth word. But over time, you learn. And then you start teaching yourself, and you don't even know it, financial literacy. If you don't have those periodicals, those magazines, those opportunities to educate yourself, how are you supposed to know this stuff?
Yes.
Well, the answer is now you got YouTube. And even if you don't have a phone or access to the internet, libraries do. And it's all available. But what I hear you saying about specifically your area of focus, financial wellness coaching, is that there is the need for people to first understand they can come to you because you have been through it. You understand. You've suffered what they are suffering, and you've come out the other side, and now you have something to share with them. Again, that I talked about it last week, but I just have to say it again. I just applaud you for doing that, because you telling your story is going to empower so many different people to overcome their situations. But the other part of it, it's not just altruistic. The other part of it is it's now created a business for you that you will be able to build into an empire of some size. I mean, I'm guessing you may be a fan of someone like Susie Orman, who,
Yes.
you know, if you know her story, she was a waitress who had no money, had no idea how you make money, and now she's a gazillionaire with an empire of her own.
Yes.
I mean, how does this happen? Well, it starts by acknowledging you have a problem. Talk us very quickly through again. AODEC, AODEC. What does that stand for?
AODIC, acknowledge that you have a problem, own your behaviors, develop selective hearing, educate yourself, and celebrate you. You know, walk in healing. That's what it's about. It's about walking in healing. It's a mindset. It's a constant battle to tell yourself you belong, you're okay, you're worthy, you're deserved. And once you become exposed to the knowledge you need, you become accountable. What you're not exposed to, you're not accountable for. But once you do become exposed, you are accountable. And AODIC touches on that. It's my story, it's my journey, it's your story and your journey, and it can be tied into you in order to get you to move forward. And it's something you'll take with you as you take the journey through life and through financial wellness.
Oh, I could not agree more, especially that's a great place to end this episode of the Nonfiction Brand podcast. Celebrate you. Now, you, of course, have said celebrate your wins when it comes to financial wellness and things like that. I want to extend that kind of into the personal branding realm of what Nonfiction Brand, what this podcast is all about. And that is celebrate the experience you have. Celebrate the expertise you've developed. Celebrate the teams and mentors and professionals and examples and the inspirational figures in your life. Own them as yours, and don't be afraid to say, you know what, I did that project, I deserve some credit for that project, and I'm not going to be a jerk about it, but I will say, just so you know, I did this part of it and I'm proud of it. And the best way to do that, everyone knows it. Anyone who's listened to this podcast more than once knows I'm going to tell you it's via the most powerful channels of communication ever in the history of the world, social media. And they're all free. There are free levels. I mean, you're already paying for your phone, so you might as well use that to get on whatever your favorite social media channels are and go ahead and share it. For example, one of the people I work with came out with a really nice short form video, and I helped them with it and all that stuff. I didn't do everything about that, but I was not afraid to share it under my name with giving credit to the people who were heavily involved, because I understood I was giving them value in return. I wasn't taking full credit for it, but I was giving them some of the value of my extended network who might have eyeballs on this video that was created, making them look better. And one of my big bumper stickers is, when you make someone look great, you look good. And that you should never, ever be afraid to use your social media channels to make someone else look great, which is why I am so pleased to be able to make Afra Smith look great, because she's got a great story to tell, a great story to share, and a great growing business that is going to make a very effective change in so many different people's lives. Again, tell us what the name of your company is and who is the perfect person who should talk to you about what you do and what services you can provide.
And my organization is the Melanin Project, and I am open to help anyone in need from all walks of life. I do specialize, I do specialize in working with Black women and the Black family, but I have an array of folks that I work with. And so anyone who needs service and needs support, they're welcome to come through my doors.
Well, and I hope you'll take up Afra's opportunity or her invitation to engage with her, because especially if you're interested in serving underserved communities, I think she is a great person to add to your network. And, everything that you're doing, I think, is brilliant. The biggest thing I want to underline and applaud you for is owning your story and sharing it openly, honestly, and in a way that motivates people who may be inspired or, may see a little bit of themselves in your story to, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And I bet you if I get her to help, it's going to go a whole lot faster. And isn't that what a good personal brand does? It makes a promise. It implies services. And if you are truly aligned with who you are, what you do, and how you do it, they are going to succeed. And boy, are they going to be satisfied. And they are going to become, what I said last week, members of your unpaid sales team. Because what's the most valuable form of marketing? Face-to-face evangelization and sharing and recommendation from friends who've used the product or service. One last question before we wrap up. If I were to ask you, how much money do you spend on acquiring new customers versus how many new customers come to you without you spending a cent? What's that ratio?
Frugal. Yeah, I'm very frugal. I don't spend a lot on advertising, believe it or not, because the power of social media really helps me. And when I started my journey, I helped people for free, and I still do that to an aspect today. But again, I think you're right. I get people referred to me because I did so much free work very early on with seminars and things like that, and free master classes. I get a lot of people coming into me because someone else engaged. So I don't spend a lot on advertising. I use the power of Facebook and Instagram, and even LinkedIn to kind of drive traffic to my organization.
Well, I don't want to quibble with your word choice too much, But I do want to point out, you don't spend a lot. Yes, you do. You spend a lot of your blood, sweat, tears, energy on doing it for free. If you don't have dollars, those things are valuable. You spending that amount of time to do that up front, that's the equivalent of spending $50,000 on paid advertising. If you don't have $50,000, you got to do it in the form of blood, sweat, and tears. And you said you did a lot of work. No, you demonstrated who you are, what you do, and how you do it over and over and over again. And that is the essence of nonfiction branding in the personal branding and small business space. The second you get tired of saying who you are, what you do, and how you do it, just get ready to say it for another 5 years exactly the same way. Because then people might understand it. Well, anyone who's heard this episode of the Nonfiction Brand podcast, I think understands your worth and value. I'd also invite you to go over to the State Bank of Cross Plains podcast called Wealthways, where you have a great conversation with two of the people over there about similar things, but especially with a bent toward how it can help women of all races, all backgrounds, all points of view, because we all are human beings and we all need each other, regardless of what other people may think. I am so happy to have you on the podcast. With me today, of course, is Afra Smith. She's going to introduce herself in a second, but I am your host, DP Knudten, and I would love for you to like, subscribe, refer this podcast to others, but most of all, can you go over to wherever you get your podcast for free and give it a review? I want an honest review, by the way, because I am all about that nonfiction branding thing. But anyway, as I said, I'm DP Knudten, and she is
Afra Smith.
And I'll be talking at you again next week. Bye-bye. Now hold on, Afra, as I go to my A camera. Hey, A camera, how you doing? I am going to be wrapping up this live stream. I'm going to sit and talk with Afra for a few minutes after I sign off here, but I do want to thank you for watching live wherever you happen to be watching live. And I hope you'll check it out the next time you see that little thing, DP is going live, pop up on your phone, because it's always great to not see you, but have you see me, I guess. All right. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.